So in a few minutes, I will introduce our main speaker, Erica Vladimir from Ione. We'll take a few minutes for any announcements. I have a couple quick ones. So it'll be announcements, then the Ione presentation and discussion. And then when we're finished with that, sometime by 3 o'clock, we'll go to individual committee meetings. So a couple quick announcements. We've begun the project that I spoke about at our last meeting of revising our online directory of organizations. This was something that Annabelle Hein-Ott started several years ago. There's about 70 local organizations, both activist and sort of some social service and helpful organizations that are listed online. So this project will consist of two main parts. One will be to revise and update the information for those organizations, which will involve contacting them and letting them know that they're on there, because some of them won't know, and getting information for them to update. And then secondly, I have a list of about 70 other organizations that are not on there. So it'll involve finding contact information and contacting them, and then getting all that into a spreadsheet. And then once that's all done, getting it to Elaine to put in the directory on the website. I got a couple volunteers so far. We could use another one or two volunteers if anyone is interested. And if you'd like to learn to upload stuff from a spreadsheet onto our website, Elaine is happy to teach somebody to do that. That's something in particular that we'd be looking for someone to do. So you can put your name in the chat, or respond to a request in the newsletter that'll come out Tuesday, or email anybody on the coordinating committee, or go to the contact form on our website. There's no way you can say you didn't know how to get in touch. We got lots of them. We will also be looking for some help. We have to update our trifold brochure. This has been around for years. We've updated a couple times, but we really want to do more of a revision over the next several months of this brochure. So if anyone would like to help with that project, also please get in touch. Who else has an announcement?
Yeah, hi everyone. Just a quick announcement, and Peter, if you don't have this info already, I can send it to you for the week's email. But the city of Syracuse is hosting 2 launch events for the Community Grid Vision Plan. Tuesday at 5 p.m. at MLK Elementary, and Wednesday at 5 p.m. at Lincoln Middle School. And there's some information in the Post Standard today about it, but I think the idea is this, and there's some details in the Post Standard too, and the city's going to share some new details about the vision for the community grid, and ask for feedback from members of the community. So it's always good to show up at those.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Tom. Yeah, that'll be in a newsletter. I have that those days. There was a pretty good article in the Syracuse newspaper a couple days ago about that. Any other announcements? Okay, our main speaker today, Erica Vladimir, is, I didn't know your title, so I named you Executive Director. I thought you'd probably like that, of Ione.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Ione, I just want to say how important I think this is. I think that for 2 big reasons. One is that we need to do what we can to get a fairer tax system in New York that stops letting billionaires off the hook. And secondly, just as important, we need our leaders in the state, our legislators, the Assembly and Senate leaders, and the governor's office know that that's what the people want, that billionaires don't have all the power. And I think this is a good way for us to be visible. And we're going to talk about some of the things we can do, like making phone calls, sending emails to those people, but also letters to the editor would be real important. And the calls to the governor are very important. So doing all of those things over the next few weeks. So Erica is going to talk about specifics, and she'll leave plenty of time for questions. And Erica, thank you for coming and welcome.
Quick note.
Judy.
I just wanted to let everyone and Erica know, I went to Rachel May's budget hearing a few days ago, and she mentioned Ione several times.
That's great.
So we have an enormous ally with Senator May. I mean, she's a force of nature, so.
And the Ione people, many of whom are from the downstate area, they know who Rachel is. Rachel is a real leader in pushing for a fairer tax system, and she's known for that. And that's a big deal. Rachel is very powerful in that. Erica, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Peter, for inviting me. Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, as Peter mentioned, my name is Erica Vladimir. My pronouns are she and her. As much as sometimes I'd like to be the executive director, I am in fact the communications director of Invest in Our New York. But fun fact, there's only 2 of us on staff. We call ourselves a little campaign that could, or that will, that does. And so, I do a lot more. Oh, excuse me, I have to sneeze. It's allergy season, y'all. I don't know about you. My allergies are really gearing up, especially it's getting warmer out. So excuse me. But I do a lot more than communications, like come to organizations such as yours and provide information about what we do for Invest in Our New York. And as Peter mentioned, we call ourselves Ione for short. One thing, I do have a quick PowerPoint that I want to share with you all just to give some background and where we are in our process. But one thing I want to share first, and I'm dropping this in the chat, is that everything that I'm going to be talking about, and Peter alluded to this, is wildly popular. We conducted a poll through Siena College, which is one of the top polling firms in the country, that showed 3 out of 4 New Yorkers across party lines and wherever they might live support increasing taxes on the ultra rich in order for us to pay for public services like childcare and strengthening our public transportation systems and building affordable housing. And so everything we are fighting for through the Ione campaign is popular. Who it's not popular with are the elected officials who are beholden to their giant corporate donors. And this is in particular, or especially, Governor Hochul. And because the governor really is the one who runs the show and the budget, we are up against a lot. So if you give me a second, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so if I skip some slides, it's because they are in Spanish. We do use this presentation in multilingual spaces. And some of it is a little bit just, I don't want to say outdated, but it's for a specific type of when we have like much bigger groups together. And so these are things that we don't have to go over. But I want to start with just giving folks a background of Invest in Our New York in case you are new and haven't really heard of us. So we are looking to create an economically just New York. We know economic justice is also racial justice, which is why we are a campaign that is supported by 84 different organizations across the state. A lot of those are what we call base building organizations. These are like Citizen Action or Make the Road. And so there are folks who help support, provide direct services to folks who need it in our state, and then teach them how to advocate for themselves and for other people. So we are trying to create an economically just New York in 3 different ways. We have a plan of how we think the state should spend money. right? These are our public dollars, and we don't want it to go towards building the Buffalo Bills a giant new stadium. We want it to go towards expanding childcare access by creating more opportunities for providers so that someone has a childcare center 10 miles from them, not 35 miles from where they live. We want the funding to go towards increasing bus service where there might be transportation deserts. We also are looking, as I mentioned, to increase taxes on really rich people and corporations. When I say really rich people, I mean one of our bills focuses on the top 5% of earners here in New York. The rest focuses on the top 1%. So we're not talking about people who make $200,000 or $300,000. We're talking about really the upper echelon here. And that's how we can create all of this new funding to invest in all of the programs that we're fighting for as well. And we also want to shift our economic development funds towards more public programs instead. So as I mentioned, the Buffalo Bills Stadium, right? We don't want taxpayer dollars going towards there. We want it to go towards the things that all of us care about and rely on. In 2024, we have a little bit of a more narrow focus, but it still, focuses on spending and making sure that we're making the ultra rich pay their fair share. But in the beginning of the year, the governor talked about how there was this giant budget gap. And so that means that we needed to cut funding or create flat funding in our agencies. And the fact is that with just cost of living, and especially with inflation, the costs of providing services that go through our agencies will also increase. So flat funding is actually a cut. And we are pushing back on that flat funding. And we need new investments. The governor's investments in her executive budget are piecemeal, they're tiny, and they really fall short of addressing a lot of the issues that we are facing, like the housing crisis and climate change here in New York. We know the best way to address this is by taxing the rich. So we have 5 bills that would raise over $40 billion every single year in new public revenue. And I just want to say 40 with the B, right? That's a lot of money. But in comparison, we spend this year, the budget looks to be about $233 billion. These 5 bills, I'll go over them in detail. And then if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. Oh, what just happened? I apologize. So the first one, our progressive income tax. Did you know that someone who makes $5 million essentially pays the same amount of taxes as someone who makes $25 million here in New York? Or that someone who's making $500,000 is paying the same amount of taxes as someone who makes $4 million here in New York? We want to create what we call progressive taxation. So this way, our tax system, our personal income tax system, doesn't look like this flat line, but it actually gradually increases depending on how much you make. We can do this by adding 10 new brackets up at the top, starting at $500,000. And that's really the folks who would be making $500,000 a year would see it's not even a 1% increase in the taxes that we would be asking to pay. We also have a corporate tax. The corporate tax would impact corporations that make over $2.5 million in profits. Here in New York, that's less than 0.2% of businesses. Most businesses don't make more than $15,000 in profits. And so we know that we would be able to, really target the real top businesses. Think about the real estate developers like Vornado, right? That have these trillions of dollars invested in like the Hudson Yards here in New York City. A lot of their development happens in New York City. They make millions of dollars, if not billions, in corporate profits. We would also be able to target companies like Google and Amazon, because even though they're not based in New York, they're doing business in New York. And so that's how we ensure that we can get more of what these corporations owe in taxes, and we can still remain competitive. Because up and down the East Coast right now, New York essentially ranks last in how much we tax corporations. So we can do a lot more to make sure they pay what they owe. Our next is capital gains. So what does this mean? When somebody buys or when someone sells their stocks, they can get a profit from that. That is considered income. We call it passive income because you're not getting up every day and going to work and getting a paycheck, right? This is like you're like selling your stocks. Now, here in New York, we tax that income, that passive income, at the same level as we do of your hard-earned paycheck income. But on the federal level, its capital gains income is taxed at a much lower rate than they do when they tax just your personal income from like your day job. And so what we want to do here in New York is to make up for that shortfall by creating a surcharge. We want to fill in that federal gap by increasing how much we tax capital gains profits in New York, but only on those who make over $500,000 a year through capital gains. So this is like less than 1% of people who are actually making money off the stock market. And then finally, our last two. Here in New York, we have what's called an inheritance tax. We want to switch this to be an heirs tax, which means that the folks who get money from someone who has passed it to them after they've passed away will have to start paying income tax on that. And it would start at over $250,000. Most people in New York are not receiving over $250,000 in inheritance. And then our billionaires tax. We call this just an extension of the property tax. So every year, your property, right, is evaluated, and you have to pay tax based on what they think it's worth, even if you're not selling your house. There's a lot of other things out there that also increase in value that people don't pay taxes on. These can be things like, again, stocks and investments, or it could also be like really big pieces of art. And so we want to create a tax similar to our already instituted property tax on these types of property, if you will. And we know in the first year that'll bring in about $20 billion because it's backwards looking for a few years. And then after that, it'll bring in about $1.5 billion a year. Okay. Now I just want to quickly go over the budget process. I'm not going to go into like every detail, even though I could, but Peter, maybe we can set up another time to go through that. But our budget season here in New York goes from about January 15th to March 31st, April 1st. Unfortunately, it'll probably be late again this year like it was last year. It is really directed by the governor, who has about 90% of the power during the budget process. That's given to any governor of New York through our Constitution. But negotiations happen essentially with three people in the room: the governor, the Speaker of the Assembly, who is Carl Hastie, and the Majority Leader of the Senate, Andrea Stewart Cousins. And this really makes it harder because there's really no public input. It's done behind closed doors. But what we know is that the budget belongs to us as New Yorkers. This is our public dollars. This is the money that we give back to New York. And it should be a moral document. It should be investing in what our priorities were. As I mentioned, this year it's going to be about $233 billion. Last year, we spent $230 billion in our budget. I also mentioned before the governor's budget proposal, well, it kind of sucked. She doubled down on her opposition to raising taxes, and she actually compared legislators who support raising taxes to loan sharks. in her State of the State. She didn't say it publicly, but she did write it in her State of the State book. We know that's not true. We know that we're not looking to tax low income and middle class New Yorkers. We're looking to tax the ultra rich. But unfortunately, the governor's proposal also doesn't look to address what we're now calling out-year budget gaps. Surprise, surprise, there is no budget gap this year, y'all. They went from us saying that we had a $9 billion budget deficit to a $4 billion budget deficit, and now we have $2 billion in surplus this year. And that's because revenue keeps growing because the rich keep getting richer. We know from some of the information that came from the governor's budget director that this surplus largely came from capital gains income taxes, which means people are really benefiting from Wall Street and the stock market. Imagine if we had something that made them pay a little bit more, how much more we could have raised than over the $2.2 billion. So because we don't have these types of policies in place, and the governor likes to drive what we call austerity-driven budgets, she's really failing to meet the moment. She's looking to put in tax breaks for big businesses and real estate. She wants to re-up something called the 421A program, which would provide big real estate developers in tax breaks to build, and I'm putting this in quotes on purpose, affordable housing, because it is not affordable at all. And she's also looking to make cuts to healthcare and education. This is after we finally had 1 full year of full funding for education system, something that advocates have been fighting for over 30 years. And now she's also looking to cut $1 billion on our Medicaid spending, as well as lowering the hourly wage of home care workers, something that shouldn't be happening considering last year they were just able to secure a fair wage program. And so she's rolling back on the commitments she has already made. So what's happening now? Well, every year after the governor puts out her budget proposal, the Senate and the Assembly have joint budget hearings, and they're broken down by topic. This was basically a marathon of probably about 4 weeks, with the finance chairs chairing each of these hearings. And on February 14th was the final hearing that ended. There was a hearing on taxes and a hearing on housing. And now the Senate and the Assembly are going back and figuring out what they want to put in what's called the One House budget. Now, this is essentially a resolution from each, the Senate and the Assembly, that's going to put out there where they want to start with negotiations with the governor on the final budget. They'll accept, reject, or modify something that the governor has put in her budget. They'll also add certain proposals that may not have been in the governor's that they want to see there. But they are essentially resolutions. They'll look like typical bills that come out of our legislature, but don't forget, the governor, again, has about 90% power here. So if the governor doesn't agree to what the legislature wants, then it doesn't make it into the final budget. As I mentioned, the budget is due April 1st. Last year, it did not get passed till May. And there are already rumors that this year the budget won't be passed until about mid-April at the earliest. So from there, I want to now just start sharing what you can do to support the efforts for Invest in Our New York. Peter mentioned a couple of these. And so first, what I want to share is for you to have an opportunity to see is, do your elected officials actually support the Invest in Our New York campaign? So I just dropped in the chat our legislative tracker. This shows you which legislators have co-sponsored our bills. And co-sponsorship is not as important during the budget process itself, but for long term, it's really helpful for us to show the legislative leadership, look, 10 of your members endorsed all of our legislative bills last year. And now this year we have 25 members, right? Showing that building of support in the legislature is really helpful. And that's what co-sponsorship does. Because all of these bills, they will not be passed as single bills on the floor. They're going to be built into the budget. So the spreadsheet that I just dropped will show you who co-sponsors the bills. And what we would ask of you is to put pressure on these legislators if you see them, if they haven't endorsed all of the bills, to ask them to. And or if they have, you can call them and thank them. You can also call and ask for a meeting with a legislator who endorses the Ione campaign to put pressure, positive pressure, if you will, to say, we need you to keep fighting for this. And so what I'm dropping in the chat now is our advocacy guide. It gives you everything from a boilerplate email that you can send to your elected official's office to set up a meeting, to a script that you can use in a meeting with them, depending on the circumstances. This might not work for, your specific legislator. You can always reach out to me. I'll make sure I put my email in the chat at the end. If you want this a little bit more tailored, or if there's anything we can do to help this make a little more specific in the conversation that you would have with your elected official. And then finally, as Peter mentioned, we are holding a letters to the editor campaign. So letters to the editor are essentially much shorter and even more personal op-eds. You can write to your local newspaper and tell them about why your elected officials should support the Invest in Our New York campaign. What I just dropped in the chat is our guide on how to do that. And then in there, there's also a link to a spreadsheet to some of the outlets that we know are really good at posting letters to the editor. If your news outlet isn't in there, that's fine. You can still, please let me know, A, so I can add them, but B, so you can also, reach out to them. You don't have to stick just to this list of news outlets that we have here. And this is a great way. Elected officials have their staff comb through the news, especially their local news, quite often to see what people are talking about. If they see the Invest in Our New York campaign is being discussed in their local outlets, they're more likely to pay attention. And so this is a great way to get their attention and also to get the attention of your neighbors. And so I want to stop there and see if you all have any questions or thoughts or anything I can help with. Go ahead, Dick.
So I have a question about one of the bills that you're proposing, which is the inheritance tax. I have actually maybe two questions about it. Number one is, where did that $250,000 number come from? And the second question is, does that mean if I inherit a house, which is a modest house, that's worth $250,000 and I sell it, is the entire proceeds of that house do all the proceeds of inheritance tax become fully taxable income at the current taxable rate? But more importantly, I don't know where that number comes from, because nobody who gets a $250,000 elevates themselves into anything remotely like wealth. So where did that number come from?
Dick, that's a great question. And I'm probably going to be more candid with you than some people would like me to be. We are still just working on amendments to this bill. This is one bill that has been a little contentious, especially because of the $250,000 threshold. We recognize, as you mentioned, I think your example is the one that we have heard a lot about, which is if someone inherits a house. Frankly, to find a house in New York that's worth less than $250,000 is hard.
Right.
And so right there can trigger you to have to pay taxes on it. We based this bill was created, oh gosh, was it 3 or 4 years ago now? And it was based off what we had seen happen in other states when they transitioned from an inheritance tax or an heirs tax to an inheritance tax. And so we are still having conversations about this. There is a certain carve out for folk when it comes to inheriting a home. But as you mentioned, most people are not going to continue living in that home. And that's what the carve out does, is that if you live in the home that you inherit, you don't have to pay taxes on it until you sell it. We know that most people tend to sell the home that they inherit versus moving into it. And so we are looking to adjust this. I think one important thing is that to know is that none of these bills will ever pass as they are because there's always going to be negotiations. And so sometimes not just the Invest in Our New York campaign, but a lot of even elected officials, right, who draft their own legislation, they started at a place where they know they're going to have to negotiate up a little more, if not a lot more. And so they don't want to pit themselves into a corner where suddenly they have to agree to a piece of legislation that almost is meaningless. And so one of the things that had been talked about here was that we want to make sure that we don't pit ourselves in a corner where we create this inheritance tax system that essentially there is no revenue that's collected and that the rich just continue to build their generational wealth without paying what they owe on, frankly, this money that they didn't do anything for when it's given to them. So I know that's like a long, winding answer. But I did want to just be honest and transparent with you about that bill.
Yeah, well, I used the house example because it was obvious, but even if it's just cash,
Yeah.
$250,000 does not make you rich or wealthy. That is, so I don't understand where the concept of inheritance tax is to prevent the transmission of great wealth from generation to generation, and $250,000 does not remotely represent anything like great wealth. In fact, it's not a lot of money in the world today. So I'm just wondering how that number came about.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we looked at what other states do, and I will say, and I should have been more specific about this, and I apologize. The taxation starts after the first $250,000. And so the first 250,000 won't be taxed. It's everything that happens above that. I see two hands up, David and then Brent.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to express my opinion that it's pretty outrageous that any inheritance would not be taxed at all when people who are struggling to get wages get taxed on just about every dollar. So I'm not so hung up on whether this is a mark of great wealth. That's a lot of money to a lot of people. It's not much money in New York City. It's a fair amount up here. But the question I had is, you said, I don't remember the precise numbers, but you were suggesting that the amount of taxes paid by very wealthy people is the same in New York as paid by relative, somewhat wealthy people. And I'm wondering if you meant that in dollar terms or in percentages.
It was percentage.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. The tax rate.
Yep, they're in the same like percent tax bracket per percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Brent.
Hi, thanks for so much information. There's something that I believe is called a stock transfer tax, which many of us heard a lot about because the Greens, local Greens, and I think New York State Greens, when they existed, maybe they still do, but they made a big point about that. And it's from what they said, and I believe it's still the case, it's collected and then it's rebated. And it seems that's a simple way to collect money at the source, so to speak. And even if it had to be compromised, that a certain percent of it was rebated, but most of it was kept. It seems that would be very efficient. It's like sales tax. I mean, from what I understand, why can that be put back on the table, or is just the opposition to that from our capitalist comrades so great that it's just not going to go anywhere? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Brent. So we used to have the stock transfer tax on our legislative agenda back in 2020 and I believe 2021 as well. when our legislative agenda was about 12 bills long, not 5, which honestly is a lot of bills to try and advocate for. One of the things we felt about the stock transfer tax, it didn't cover all types of instruments that can be sold and transferred through Wall Street. And so our capital gains tax helps cover some of the things that the stock transfer tax won't. And again, Brent, I want to, say something that I had said when I was talking to Dick about the inheritance tax. We're aiming high. And that's not, part of it is A, we believe in what we're aiming for, but B, also because we know we're going to have to negotiate down, especially when it comes to our capitalist comrades in the New York State legislature and the executive chamber. And so I could see something where if the capital gains tax bill is on the table, it sort of gets negotiated to a place where it's similar to a stock transfer tax, that we stop rebating it or we stop rebating the whole thing. But we're not going for like those, comparatively, those small pieces. We're going for the type of wealth where, there's an organization called the Patriotic Millionaires. These are millionaires who actually talk about the fact that they want to be taxed more. And one of them, Morris Pearl, shared how he hasn't worked a day in his life in about 15 years, and he just gets a check every month for about $20,000, $30,000. And that's because he's got a broker who's selling stocks and a bunch of shit on Wall Street for him. And it's like he hasn't lifted a finger in a day in 15 years. And so we want to go after that type of wealth. Our capital gains tax does that. The stock transfer tax is much smaller and wouldn't go after as many instruments, wouldn't bring in the same amount of revenue. And so we're aiming high.
I've talked with John Mannion about this in the past, and he said something that I thought he promised to vote for this and then didn't last time around. To me personally, but anyway, he expressed, concern that I'm pretty sure is widespread in the legislature, which is that if you tax the rich, they'll just leave. And I'm kind of wondering about whether you've gathered data on that, number one. And number two, if you have a strategy to do this in concert with Connecticut and New Jersey so as to ameliorate that, at least so as to ameliorate that anxiety.
Yeah.
Magnarelli says the same thing every year when I bug him about it. He says, "Oh, you have to understand, the millionaires live in Manhattan and it's an island. All they have to do is drive across the bridge and they're out of our state, and they'll do that." So, Erica?
Yeah, so I just dropped in the chat a new report from the Fiscal Policy Institute that takes a look at census data and tracks who is actually leaving New York. Now, look, during the pandemic, a lot of millionaires did leave New York City. Most of them went someplace else. They went to the Hudson Valley or Long Island. Some of them went to other states. But we know that's because they could actually afford to leave a very dense city when it was dangerous. Now, not only did most of them come back, but we gained from 2021 or 2020 to 2021, we gained over 10,000 new millionaires in New York. So they're not leaving. They're actually more are coming, and we are creating more millionaires here in New York. What we do know who is leaving are very low income New Yorkers, people who can no longer afford rent or childcare. Those are the top 2 reasons why people are leaving. And somewhat of the upper, I would say like middle class, a little bit of the upper middle class. People who have the means, but also have more means to be able to leave. And when they do, they're going to states like New Jersey and Connecticut, which have very similar tax rates to New York. They're not all going to Florida, and they're not all going to Texas, where there is no personal income tax rate. They're staying in these higher taxed states because they know that the services that they can get from the state are better than what they would go and get from like Florida and Texas. The governor even mentioned this in her State of the State. So if you talk to, Senator Mannion again, you can remind him that even our governor knows that the rich aren't leaving. She said in her State of the State, people aren't leaving because of high taxes in New York. They're leaving because they can't afford to live here and raise a family here. So it's the middle class and low income New Yorkers who are leaving while we gain thousands of millionaires. And the data backs that up. Any other questions?
Erica,
Yeah.
could you talk for a minute about the spending proposals that Ione has in their platform and how those are
Yeah.
prioritized?
Yeah, if you give me a second, I am going to pull that up for you all.
And I'd like everybody to know there's two one-pagers that the links were in the newsletter last week and they'll be there again. This one has the 5 bills in it, and this other one has the spending proposals. So I would encourage y'all to download those two one-pagers and familiarize yourself with the specifics.
Yeah, so as Peter just mentioned, and as I mentioned before, we're not looking just to raise new public dollars. We want to make sure that it's invested in all of the priorities that most New Yorkers have on an individual and a community level. And so I do want to say that it took us a while to just drill down to these specific investment priorities. There are some things on here that we do fully support, but we are also mindful about which organizations can give the most time to the Ione campaign. And we want to make sure that we prioritize what they are fighting for. So as I mentioned before, we know that home care workers are looking to could possibly see their hourly wage go down. That's not necessarily here in our investment priorities for us to like fight for. It's not to say that we're not fighting for it. We talk about it in every meeting. We are working alongside the Caring Majority, which is a coalition that specifically focuses on home care support, and working with them to make sure that all of our messaging is aligned. And so I did just want to like share with you that this investment agenda is not exhaustive. It's just some of the things that a lot of our organizations have been collectively fighting for a few years now. So we know that we have a huge housing crisis here in New York, and so that's one of our top priorities. And it's kind of I'm going to call it a little silly that we have to fight for $250 million for things towards like the housing access voucher program when you think about the fact that our budget is $233 billion, right? So we are asking for $250 million so that people can either afford a home. So this is essentially like a voucher program similar to what we have on the federal level, Section 8. This would be a state level one that provides vouchers for folks to help make up the difference of what they can pay for rent versus what rent actually costs. And this will be for folks who are currently experiencing homelessness or someone who is suddenly finding themselves priced out of their home. And we know that it's happening a lot lately, right? Rents are just skyrocketing across New York, especially in New York City. And people are suddenly finding themselves homeless because they can no longer afford to stay in the home they've been in, some of them for years. We are also looking for some big investments, $5 billion towards what's called the Social Housing Development Authority. This is based off the Vienna model in housing. It is government-owned housing that is mixed income. So we want to create this authority that will have the ability to build housing and then also help folks manage their own buildings in a very democratic way so that residents themselves get to decide, do they want to build a community garden? Who should they be using because their HVAC might need to be updated? But this would be it would all be affordable housing, but it would be mixed income in the sense that this authority would be able to say, nobody's going to pay 20% higher than 20% of their income for housing. And so that means someone who is making $500,000 a year could still live in the same apartment complex as someone who's making $30,000 a year. But they both have dignified homes to live in. And they don't have to worry about suddenly a private landlord increasing their rent and to the point where they can no longer afford it. And then we also want to invest $5 billion in improving housing conditions. So what does this look like? Well, look, our public housing, NYCHA, especially in New York City, but also public housing in like Westchester and Yonkers, it is decrepit. The mold that a lot of these people live with, the fact that there are thousands of units that are open, but they're unavailable for people to live in because they need to have some type of termite mitigation, or again, like they need there's too much mold, whatever it might be. It's going to cost a lot of money. And the fact is that the federal government is not going to come and save us. And so we would like to see the state start investing real public dollars into making sure that these apartments are livable. And then also targeting the fact that a lot of these places aren't ready for all of the climate disasters that are still coming our way. So how do we make sure that our windows are insulated? How do we make sure that some of these, these buildings, when there's flooding, that their electricity doesn't go out, so someone on the 14th floor isn't stuck in their apartment for a week because they can't walk up and down 14 flights of stairs. I can't walk up 14 flights of stairs, let's be real. So those are some key investments. Also, I was just talking about it, climate. We need to make sure that we are investing in climate ready programs. And so we are supporting New York Renews in their efforts to bring in $1 billion towards what they call shovel ready projects. So these are just like not projects that we're thinking about, that the state needs to think about, but like are ready to go, and they just don't have the funding behind it that they need. And then again, making sure that we are upgrading all of our buildings to be renewable, to be using renewable energy, and transitioning off of oil and gas and coal. Some other things we're looking at, our school systems are losing about $2 billion this year in federal funding that came through the American Rescue Plan. And so not only is the governor looking to cut $500 million from state funding, but there's $2 billion on top of that they are not going to be seeing. And that means schools are going to be impacted by not having enough for guidance counselors, for literacy coaches. Community schools might not be able to bring their dentist or eye doctors back in. Some of the schools that were giving free lunch, even though it's not a statewide program, to everybody, they might not be able to do that anymore. And so we're looking to make sure that $2 billion gap is filled in. Want to make sure our childcare workforce is paid like real workers. Right now, they make less than people who work at McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King to take care of our children. And so while the governor invested in making it so that more people could access childcare last year, there's not enough childcare around for them to actually access. They could qualify, but as I said earlier, if their closest childcare is 35 miles away, that might be too much for them to be able to do every single day. And so it's not enough to make sure people are qualified for it. We actually got to give them the childcare that they qualify for. And that means paying workers who are not going to say, excuse my language, but fuck this, I'm going to go work at McDonald's and make more money. And so, those are a few things I could go on, but I'm going to stop there because I know that you all have to move into your committee meetings. And so I don't want to hold you up there, but happy to answer any additional questions.
Erica, thank you. I'll leave a minute for more questions, but I just want to make sure everybody knows. So Tuesday's newsletter and every week until the budget is passed, we'll try to put some specific links in the newsletter to actions that you can take. We're going to ask people to think particularly, the emails and the calls to legislators are critically important, including the House and Senate leadership. That's oftentimes the roadblock, the bottleneck to getting these bills on the floor, as well as the governor. We'd also ask people think seriously about a letter to the editor. That can have huge influence, and we'd like to see some of those. And we'll try hard to arrange some legislative visits. You know, we can show up either on Zoom or at their offices and let them know, show our faces, and thank them for what they are supporting, and let them know what we want to see more of from them. So, Elaine, maybe, did you have a question?
I just had, well, it was a little bit similar. So I think right now the target is our representatives in the Assembly and the Senate, because we need to get these bills in their one house budget. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. So the more you put pressure on them, the more they're going to go to Speaker Hasty or Majority Leader Stewart Cousins and say, my constituents won't get off my case about raising taxes on the wealthy, about the Invest in Our New York Act. It's an election year. You got to help us out, leader, right? Like, we got to do something here. And so as long as you put the pressure on them, they're going to put pressure on leadership, and the more likely it'll be in the one house budgets.
So if you email your representatives, should you CC or like include leadership as well? Or is it better for us to bug our representatives and for them to bug leadership?
That is a good question. I don't think it hurts to CC leadership.
Okay.
Like, why not? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any last questions for Erica? Erica, thank you so much. This is really
Thank you
helpful,
so much
and
for
we will
having me.
follow up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you would like, Peter, I think you might get my weekly emails that I've
Yes,
been sending out. But if
yes.
anyone else on this like call wants to get, I send out like an Invest in Our New York weekly catch up every Friday around 1 o'clock. If you would like, you can, again, I'm gonna put my email in the chat. You can just shoot me an email and let me know, and I'll make sure I add you directly to the list. And if you have any questions, if you would like some help writing a letter to the editor, if you want someone to review it for you, I'm here. I'm more than happy to help with that. And if you are part of any other organization that you think might be interested in this kind of conversation, let me know and we can schedule that too. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Erica. We'll be
Have
in
a good rest
touch.
of your
Thanks.
Sunday, y'all.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.
So I'm going to share my screen. This is the agenda I have. And I just wanted to show this. Okay, so I posted this on our website right now, and I'd like to include it in our newsletter and on social media. I did send it to Dustin too to see if he had any suggestions on it. But what I did was last year there was actually, well, 2022 to 2023, there was a good amount of races that occurred that was for town or and even in the city. So some races that usually are in odd elections occurred in even. So I wanted to compare those numbers, 2022 versus 2023. And so I did that. And of course, I saw that turnout was much higher in 2022 than 2023.
Mhm.
Wow.
And so I just show some specific examples. So some of these positions are on 2022 because someone resigned, someone was appointed somewhere else and they had to resign. The position becomes open for whatever reason. And so then the board has to refill that position at the next election usually. So this is Syracuse 5th district. They had an election in 2022 and the same candidate ran in 2023, and you can just see the difference in turnout. Same thing, County DeWitt. Oh, go ahead.
The only thing is that they will still be voting on odd years.
Yeah, so I added that little like snippet saying that Syracuse is exempted on the new law because
And villages, villages also,
yeah, I
but-
don't include villages in here.
but not towns. So,
Yeah.
but if you put a town, it might include village elections too.
No, so town elections are separate, villages are completely different.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so Town of DeWitt had one, I think same candidates. But again, you just see the amount of turnout versus 2022 versus 2023. Town of Manlius had a vacancy in 2022. This was really interesting because the same candidates ran. It's a little different because like right in 2022, it's 2 candidates running for 1 position. In 2023, it's 6 candidates running for 3 positions. But looking specifically at their turnout for those 2 candidates, they each saw a 1.7 increase in voters. Like it was exactly the same, no matter they were Democrat or Republican. They both saw the same increase. So I thought that was really interesting since Republicans seem scared by this. I show town of Onondaga town councilor. Town of Van Buren was a dramatic increase in 2022 versus 2023. Some of these are uncontested as well, so it's the same person running. They just get more votes in even years. Town of Pompey had a town councilor race, and same thing, they had a highway superintendent, same person, uncontested, ran on the Democrat and Republican line. He saw more votes in 2022, less votes in 2023. And so then that's how I wrap it up, since this is a little bit combative of what Onondaga County is doing with their lawsuit. And so that's on our website. Oh, I can put it in the chat too. But so if anyone wants to review that, if you see any like language I should change or have any suggestions, oh yeah, Deborah.
This has already passed, right? And it's been signed by the governor and it's in place right now. It's just that the county is filing the lawsuit, but it's in place at this point, right? Okay.
Yes, I don't know, like if they file a lawsuit, what? I would assume because it's only one county, it wouldn't stop it.
Right.
So
have they gotten anybody else to kind of like join in?
Not as far as I saw, no.
Well, I
haven't
money. I haven't read the lawsuit, but it has to be based on home rule concepts for the local governments. If that's the case, if you lost here, it could be applied elsewhere, even if there are no direct order to do things elsewhere.
Their argument is that odd is in their charter, county charter.
Oh, well, then it might depend on county charters.
They change the county charter all the time.
Yeah, it's one word. They change one word and they're done.
Yeah. So if it's not, I was thinking of writing a letter to the editor because they do change the charter regularly. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, as far as I know, they only have to go to the voters in order to change it if they change like an elected position's job role, basically. Then I think they're supposed to go to the voters, but like I think this change, I don't even think they need to.
No, I don't think they need to. This doesn't require a referendum, I don't think.
No, and then if they really had a big problem with it, then they would put it on the ballot anyways, and we would pick or choose.
So many better ways to spend $100,000.
Yeah.
So it's important that we are aware of this because once again, our county government is doing something that's destructive of democracy and promotes one-party rule and financially irresponsible. But what do we want to, I mean, what should we do? Is there anything we should do other than keep an eye on where the lawsuit goes? And I mean, the Democratic legislators are already opposed to it, and we know it's a straight party line vote.
Mm-hmm. So one reason why I did it was to combat their narrative of, just some of the things that they say, like whether, like a lot of people, or they'll say that the Democrats passed it on the New York, the state level to help Democrats, but with this data, you can show that it helps everybody. So it's just a little bit of information that we could use if there's more progress on this, if there's more updates. I just wanted to make sure that data was there, and so we could use this if we need it. It's there.
And what just because the legislature approved it doesn't mean it's been spent yet.
Right.
If you have enough people saying, well, that's wasteful, and they go to their legislator, or the county executive, then they don't have to spend it just because the legislature has approved their spending it. So, and then we hear, I think, from people like Mary that this is only the down payment on a lawsuit. That a
Right.
lawsuit would cost a lot more than $100,000. Personally, I don't want $100,000 of our tax money going to this thing. It's wasteful.
And I think
As Elaine demonstrated, how she's shown in their charts, is it's not an attempt by Democrats to win all the elections.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, even in even in Republican areas, the Republicans vote more.
That was the other narrative they use is, well, no one will go down the ballot to vote. And again, this shows that, yeah, they'll go down the ballot. The biggest obstacle of getting people to vote is getting them there.
Mm-hmm.
And they may very well be spending some of this money already. I mean, they may have, you know, do we know that they haven't hired an attorney and are
We
working
don't
on this?
know that they haven't hired an attorney, but they can get out of a contract because
Yeah.
all the contracts have escape clauses. They give a month's notice and they're
Yeah.
out of contract.
So that's
So let's say we only spent $20,000 of wasted rather than 100,000.
stop a minute, God. So that's what I put together. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think your
Okay.
points
I
about
think it is.
what their arguments are not even true, that it doesn't necessarily favor one party over the other.
And then, so the next thing on the agenda I have is the next kind of thing I would look at is when we look at election results. And I did this a little bit in I think last year with the voting poster I did. What I would like to show too is when we're posting voting results, we show how much the Republican got, how much the Democrat got, but we should always be showing how many didn't vote, because I think that would show more people of like that no, like your government's not responding to you because not enough people are voting. So that's the next kind of data thing I'd like to look at and potentially put on our website. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up before I do it this time. Yeah, Judy.
Yeah, just a note, on Thursday, I helped out at a naturalization service and registered voters of new citizens. There were like 45 people there.
Wow.
I mean, it's a wonderful thing to do. And I was collecting their voter registration forms at the end. You give a little spiel about voting and how to fill out the form and the way it all works. And almost every single, and as I was collecting the forms to make sure that they had filled in every box that they needed to fill in, and they declare a party, practically every single person said no party.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
I guess I shouldn't have been surprised at that, but I kind of was.
Yeah. And I think like that's one thing I want to show in the primary, like in the June primary. Again, like even it's a specific party, Democrats have to come out to pick their candidates, but how many Democrats are coming out versus how many are staying home? So many. Okay. So that's that. So now we can talk about the 2024 candidates. We want to talk about the forum for a minute.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we need a date, we need a place, we need all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so let me just raise so I don't think any planning has happened since the last meeting, because as of the last meeting, we were still waiting for maps.
Yeah.
And we have maps now, although they're not finalized yet, and so we don't know. So yeah, so so I don't think any forward progress has happened since the last conversation. And I guess sort of one question I just had from the last meeting is, you know, kind of how much do we want to make this sort of a CNY solidarity forum, like in partnership with some of the other indivisible groups who have already said they want to kind of pitch in, and how much, you know, like I forget who it was, but somebody at the last meeting sort of raised some issues of like, should we do something on the south side where it's easier for people to get people in the community without cars to get there? So that's somewhat of a different sort of vision for the event.
Mhm.
Yeah, from what I got from last meeting, it seemed like it would potentially be a separate, kind of more like an event than a CNY Solidarity meeting. And then I know the coordinating committee talked about it a little bit, like talked about maybe different ideas for places. And then like looking at our schedule too, like it seemed like maybe we didn't have to reserve March or April meetings for that maybe, because we were trying to figure out dates for future meetings. And yeah, anything else that we talked about?
Elaine, did you just say not having it as on a Sunday?
I mean, Sunday still could work. I just think it might be more, it potentially be more like a separate, maybe a separate thing than a coalition meeting. Like it'd be a forum sponsored by the coalition, and then I know probably indivisible groups. And then I didn't know if other groups and organizations would want to do sponsor it as well. And so I think we were going to talk to Jackie. I think Jackie was here last time.
Yeah, Jackie was on the call earlier. She got off a little while ago, but I'll give you my opinion. I think it's worth following up with Jackie and seeing if there is another group that would like to co-sponsor, and looking for a location where more people could come that don't have their own transportation. I think it'd be good for us as an organization to be able to do that. But as to whether, yeah, I think I agree with what Elaine just said. It could be, you know, the candidates forum sponsored by CNY Solidarity and whoever. I think that's good. There may be an argument for saying this should be a regular CNY Solidarity Sunday meeting. I don't know. I'd be happy to consider alternatives.
I think it should not be a regular CNY Solidarity Sunday meeting. Because that means we'll get 30 or 40 people, and it's the same people we always get. And I think we need to reach out to the community, the broader community, and turn this into a bigger event. And I actually like the idea of the Southwest, is that it? Southwest Community Center. We had a meeting there way back, as I recall. It was either 2017 or 2018, and we filled the room. There were a lot of people in that meeting. I think we've only been there once or twice over the years. It doesn't have to be there, but I think it should be, and I agree it needs to be in a place that people can get to. And I think as far as the day of the week, I'm not sure about that. Sunday is church day for a lot of people. So that might be hard. But I don't think it should be a regular meeting on a Sunday afternoon.
And so I know I'm happy to help plan this, and I think Tom and Deborah, you're working on it as well. Chris, I think you're
volunteered.
So do we want to set up like a meeting now to meet to start hashing out details, or?
And Judy's on too.
Judy, okay.
I think you enrolled me in a meeting last week, so you're involved.
Yeah, let's go ahead and set up a follow-up meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to do Zoom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's so Elaine, Deborah, me, Judy, Chris, we'll follow up by email after today and set up a meeting. Is that,
Sure, I can do a doodle poll or something.
thanks, Elaine.
And then anyone else?
I know I have a couple of names from a couple of the other indivisible groups. I haven't talked to them in the past few weeks, but they earlier in the year said they were interested in helping. So once you send something out, I can forward it to them.
Perfect. Okay.
You know, I don't know if the schools are available at all, but you know, way back when we had those town halls and we were able to use the schools for those. And
Right.
I don't know if they're, you know, what their availability is at this point, but that would probably something we should look into.
Yeah.
Right. But that
What I
wasn't for the
what I
primary.
remember
that-
is that they can be available. There's a fee for the custodian's time,
Mhm.
which would
Right.
not be a big deal for us, I think.
Right, and they weren't for primaries, they were for the general election.
Right.
That should be okay.
But we had some just town halls, I think, also just with the, you know, we had a town hall with CACO. It wasn't a forum, it was something, anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right, we did that
Worth
at
looking
Nottingham.
into.
Okay. Okay. Anything on the New York Senate 50? Oh, so I was going to bring this up. So I know we're doing a New York 22 forum. Would we be interested in having the New York Senate 50 is also having a primary? Would the coalition be interested in having those two candidates come and ask questions? That could be a meeting at the CNY Solidarity. How many people are in Senate 50? Do you know? I am.
Is that Mannion's district?
Mannion.
Oh, no, I'm
Not
in
me.
Rachel's.
So many people are in Rachel's, I think, right?
I'm in Mannion's, yeah.
You're in Mannion's, okay.
No, I'm in
And
Rachel's. I'm in Rachel's.
does anyone know anything about the two candidates? Just that you can kind of say right now.
I know, so Chris Ryan is the minority leader of the Onondaga County Legislature, Democrat. And he's very involved in unions. I think both of them are very involved with unions. And then the other candidate, that's Chris Ryan. And then the other one is Tom Drum, and he's in Oswego. And he used to be a Oswego legislator. And he also works with unions. And so, yeah, it's an interesting race.
Tom also used to do some organizing with the Oswego Indivisible group. Yeah.
Yes.
Chris Ryan came and spoke at one of our meetings a few years ago in the basement at Park Central Church. I don't, something to do with voting. Remember Dustin was there and I don't remember who else, but Chris, you know, we have a little bit of a relationship. I don't know anything about Tom.
Yeah, two good candidates. I'm like, I don't know. So yet, so okay, and then anything on Representative Williams? I have that fundraiser that he did with the House leader now.
Johnson,
Yeah.
Mike Johnson.
Yeah. Anything else on Williams right now?
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody has their ear to the rail about the viability of the maps that have been released. I know that what I'm hearing, you know, and this is all sort of yakety yak with all of my friends is who have their ear to the rail, is that the downstate Democrats are not happy.
All right.
We're happy
Mm-hmm.
because, and Brandon Williams is unhappy.
Even though he's in the district, like what?
Yeah,
It was the only major kind of.
and that it's
Benefit.
pretty assured that it's going to go to a court case because of this.
Well, if they, I don't know, because it seemed like some people were saying just pass them so that we can be done with this.
That's what Common Cause is saying, pass them, we need
Right.
to have the maps.
We need to move on.
Right. That's my sense, is that if the legislature approves the current maps, there will not be further litigation, or if somebody tries, it won't go anywhere. But if the legislator tries to create a more aggressive Democratic gerrymander to make some tweaks down on Long Island and stuff, then the downside is litigation possibly delays it and we get stuck with our current maps for this cycle. Yeah.
So, Tom, have you heard what the chances of that happening, or is it just sort of rumor mill at this point, or are we
It's
just
just
guessing?
soon enough.
If they have an idea when it will go to the legislature.
this week.
Oh, this week?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to. They have to approve them by 28th.
By the 28th.
Oh, okay.
So we will have answers soon.
Yes.
But we've been waiting and waiting. We still have
I
3
can
more.
wait till the 29th to get the answer.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Well,
potentially in the newsletter, do you think it's important to share that Speaker of the House came and supported Brandon Williams? Probably. Yeah.
What's interesting is none of the state legislature Republicans are supporting Brandon Williams. I haven't heard of any. The Republicans are saying that's just the way the maps were drawn. They're not.
Oh, they're not like saying, "Oh yeah, it's horrible for you."
And I heard in a few offhanded comments at the Democratic meeting that we had the other day, people that know Republicans that are on the Republican committee, that they don't like Brandon Williams either. That they're pretty fed up with him, and for whatever reasons they may have. So,
But, I've been kind of wondering if the most recent shenanigans of rejecting aid for Israel
Ukraine.
and Ukraine have are traceable to Brandon Williams. That is to see if is it clear what his position has been on the. I mean, everybody assumes he is in lockstep with the crazies in the leadership, but do we really have any hard information that we can nail him with?
Well,
They haven't taken anything to the floor, right?
That's the problem. I don't know if there have been floor votes.
yeah.
That's the whole point, is
but
Johnson's stopping
Deborah would
floor votes.
I think they're just probably whip counts.
And then he was at that really not good some event in Washington D.C. too that was really bad. He was there.
CPAC? The Donald Trump show?
I don't know which one it was, but should make a note to make sure people know he was there.
I've sort
Okay.
of been following the outcome of CPAC. What a clown show.
Yes, really.
I mean, every year it seems to get crazier and crazier. It seems to me anyway.
Yeah.
Nazis and anyway.
I guess on that note too is like we're talking about our representative, but we haven't really been talking about the presidential race too. And it does seem like it's happening all over again where Trump is dominating the headlines. Are we concerned about that? Like,
I'm voting for everything, whoever the Democrats give me to vote for. I'm kind of
Yeah.
hoping for a contested convention, but
The one thing I would say about the presidential is as New York voters, right? Like the kind of there's plenty of things to worry about with the presidential, like what do the polls look like, what's Biden's
Yeah.
health look like, all of that.
exactly.
But as New York voters, the biggest thing that we can impact is races other than the presidential,
Yeah.
which still help the presidential, right? Because if Mannion or Sarah Hood or whoever, turns out lots of voters, then that's helping the Democratic presidential candidate, rack up the popular vote win too. So I just think that should be our if you're panicked about a race that you feel like you have no control over, like focus on a race that you do have more control over and just put your energies there.
okay, that's
And
helpful.
also think about races in other states. For instance, some of the Republican senators, like John Tester in Montana, is vulnerable. We want to make sure that we have the House and the Senate, because I think that may be our lifesaver.
And then we got wins right in Wisconsin. They passed fair maps, or better maps, so that's good.
Oh,
That's
and then,
right.
and then in Alabama, that great court case.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
Yeah,
there's
and
a,
it's like,
Oh, we
and
have
it,
to
that,
be, we have to be able to work with that.
the congressional races are always important, obviously, but one reason they're important this year is that it's the newly elected Congress that counts the electoral votes at the beginning of
Yes.
January. So,
Mhm.
so we want John Mannion or Sarah Clee Hood counting those electoral votes, not
Wow, so,
Brandon
so,
Williams. Yeah.
so what you're saying is if a third party keeps either of the major candidates from getting sufficient electoral votes, then it goes to the House.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying like the January 6th thing that happened 4 years ago, the what is supposed to be a routine formal certification of the Electoral College victory was not routine and formal 4 years ago. And if there's a similar effort this time, then Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress can help prevent anything from going haywire.
So
Mhm.
my question is, if neither candidate, because of third party voters, because of a third party gets sufficient electoral votes to win, then it goes to the House.
That is correct, but the
And,
odds of that happening.
what, I'm sorry, and is it the old House or the new House?
You
It's
have-
it's the new House, but it's one state, one vote, which is an
Yeah.
insane rule.
Oh, okay.
But the odds of that happening are low, and we have literally no control over it. So, yeah.
And there's, I think the only third party candidate who's ever gotten any electors was that crazy guy from the South. What was his name?
Ross Perot.
No. He was from,
George Wallace?
yes, George Wallace. Didn't he get some elected?
Yeah, maybe. But
Yeah,
Not even, nobody else has.
but the point is with Trump, it doesn't matter what the results are. He's going to try to get to flip the Electoral College by
Right.
any means. I mean, has nothing to do with the truth, the reality, or what the law requires. It's just does he have the political muscle to defraud us all?
Well, but if he gets in, then if we hold the House and the Senate, we cannot approve his appointments.
Right.
If-
So like
Yeah,
New York Senators.
yeah, that won't work. He'll put in acting officials. That's how he invaded Portland. To see all the people who invaded Portland were headed by acting officials. It'll be
But
the
no,
end of
they were
democracy.
acting, but they had originally been confirmed.
Not the people who led those invasions. They were all acting. All the people who had been confirmed were gone. They were all fired.
I know, but these people were confirmed at lower levels or somewhere else in the
So I mean, my view is David and Chris are both right. David is right that Trump did before and will even worse this time sort of violate and abuse lots of checks and balances in the system. But Chris is also right that having a Democratic controlled
Right.
House and Senate is
Right.
better than not having one. They are in some position to put some limits on him. So they're both right. And still, either way, we have very little way to influence whether Trump gets elected or not here in New York. And so focus on the Democratic House races and support races in other states as you can, yeah.
Well, I agree with that, but the other thing to point out is last time we were engaged in texting and phone banking in the presidential race in other states, in swing states. And that's something, we can consider this time around.
Yep.
also Senate, because we have more senators vulnerable than the Republicans.
Hmm.
And some really good ones.
Okay. I'm gonna go to the next topic if that's good. Okay. So the next topic I have is housing and lead, and I don't have any updates. I didn't know if Chris, you have anything from
On lead?
Yes.
Um,
any updates?
no updates right now.
Okay. And then this is definitely related to that is the community grid. And so the city did release their plan. It's on the website. Take a look. They have those open houses to get public feedback. That's all I had for community grid. Anybody else have anything else on the community grid?
Could you just say on what website? Is it,
I will put it right in the link.
It'll be in the newsletter. There's 2 open houses coming up. And there was quite a good article in the Syracuse newspaper a couple days ago, Friday maybe? I don't
It
know.
was in today's too. It was in the Sunday.
Today's
Okay.
print copy. But that's city, right? Those are city run.
Yeah,
Those pictures were just kind of like, really?
yeah.
Hard to imagine. And then, but right on their website, you can contact them. So if you can't make those meetings and you want to make a comment, send one in.
okay, and if I don't want to wait till the Tuesday newsletter, what is the name? Did you put it on?
Yeah, I just put this is the email, or this is the website where the plan is. If you want
Oh,
this
okay.
article, I have that too. I can
I
find
think that
Oh,
the
that's the
SEER.gov has the 2 events listed on that website, I believe.
and then put the other one in. So a lot of times in the newsletter, if something's subscribed, we put in the MS link, because then you can get to it without being subscribed. I don't know. Weird.
A few days ago, there were some illustrations of the 2 roundabouts they will now have south of the south of downtown.
Yeah, over by Brighton.
Yeah,
So I think on this plan, on the community grid vision plan, I think if Peter, if you go to a NYCLU meeting, if they have any comments on it, we'd be interested in those probably.
okay.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know if there's a meeting this week or not, but I'll definitely stay in touch with those.
Okay. And then the last topic I have is Micron.
Yeah, really brief. So, 3 weeks ago, Greening USA sent out 20 or 30 invitations to join the coalition. Weirdly enough, a majority of those emails were actually blocked and rejected, and either they were mostly Gmail accounts and they never went through, and we don't know why. So we didn't get responses from most of the organizations that were sent. And I don't think it was a bulk mail issue, because there just weren't that many of them. We're only maybe 15 to 20 organizations, so we don't know why that happened. But we did get responses from Agree to Join, and it's an organization that I know nothing about called Energy 21. I don't know who those people are, or if anybody's heard of them. So as of now, the Micron Coalition consists of Greening USA, Solidarity, Sierra Club, Agree, and Energy 21. And we're having our first organizational meeting tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And we still need to figure out about the mailing problem. So there's a possibility there'll be other organizations joining. That's it. And we're waiting. This is like for the shoe to drop. This is now going on for months, and we have no idea. Everybody thought, well, we're going to hear in February from the feds, and now, well, we're going to hear in March.
Yeah,
So there's even no guarantee that the money will be there at this point. Although it's kind of hard to believe. I mean, Biden came to Syracuse to push this thing, to promote it. So it's kind of hard to believe that they won't fund it, but so far, no word. Nobody knows.
There's an article on Micron in this morning's paper as well, a big article on Micron.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, I wrote some highlights from it, just that, yeah, they're not expected to hear until like late spring, which I think March, right? And then that 16-member community engagement committee that was supposed to guide the 500 million in community investment funds hasn't met, or is behind schedule as well.
Right. Everybody's waiting.
Yeah, and then the Onondaga County Industrial Development Agency, the draft environmental report also says would be ready for public review in the spring, but again, just not.
Yep, everybody's waiting.
So I think I was gonna put it in this week's, but then I was like, you know what, there's no update technically, so I
Yeah,
think I'll wait
there
until
was an interesting op-ed or letter to the editor today in the paper about pilots, payment in lieu of taxes. And I did a whole bunch of research into OSIDA's, how OSIDA does that. And it might be worth a letter to the editor, getting that out in the open. The city of Syracuse, SIDA, Syracuse Industrial Development Authority, requires minority participation in any projects that they fund. It's now requirements, not optional. The county has it as an option, and when you actually do the math, so you compare a typical pilot with their minority option and a typical pilot without their minority option, it's so little extra value to the developer that there's no reason that a developer would ever buy into it. So they basically have it as an option, and then they sabotage it by making it basically not significant. And I just think that might be worth calling the public's attention to, because the pilot issue is now going to be huge in terms of all the development that's going to go on up in the northern suburbs as a result of Micron. And you're going to see lots and lots of tax breaks given to developers building up there. So it might be worth putting that out on the street.
an urban jobs task force pushed Syracuse to do that, right?
Yeah, what happened in the case of SIDA, it was really all about Urban Jobs Task Force pushing that. But
So
they don't have I don't think that Aggie Lane and the folks at Urban Jobs Task Force really have any inroads into the county.
that's I'm wondering if we can be like, if this is their language that the Syracuse Industrial has, if we can just say, you know, industrial agency Onondaga, we want you to adopt this language, right? They just adopted new language for more tax breaks for those 3 different tax breaks that they were proposing for market rate housing, senior housing, and then affordable housing. I think all they passed those, so they did that even though there was a governmental agency saying that they potentially wasn't allowed. But so they can change their policy. So if we can get language and say and start sending them letters saying we want this change, maybe we can have an effect there.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. I don't want to pour water on that at all, but you should ask Aggie, because she was saying how the different IDA policies, they're very different. So
Okay.
that you can't just kind of copy paste, but definitely.
Right. They're very different.
Okay, so definitely if we do want to move forward with this, we definitely need to make sure we check with Aggie and Urban Jobs for sure.
Yeah.
And then the other, the other thing was just that the other things went through, so I want to make sure people knew that those tax policies were approved with no discussion.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to get involved in this, it seems to me the point is to have an objective, not to have intricate knowledge of what each policy is at the moment. I mean, that might be important to figuring out what needs to be changed, but the fundamental question is, how should this be done? I see 2 possible positions. One is there should be no pilots, because this is a strong economic development need coming from this, and there will be a market, and this isn't necessary. The other one would be pilots are for low-income housing only. But to me, the idea that all the economic development and the towns, the suburban towns, are upset about this.
Yeah, they are.
Right.
So they see that they're going to be on the hook for a bunch of spending without any revenue if this is the way growth is managed. So there may be something to be done there.
I was surprised we haven't heard from schools too, because they're not like.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's some leverage there. I'd forgotten that, David, that there has been some pushback from the town governments just recently about this. And we have a couple of new legislators, Nodesia and Mo, I'm sure would be supportive. They have no power, but are there other people in the towns that that have Republican legislators that might be interested. I think you're right. Aggie is the place to start for what specifically would need to happen. But
So Ann, you want to talk about the little ranch house that was sold for $2 million with 4 acres, right a mile from the Micron site that you saw in the paper today?
Wow. That's in the real estate section?
Yeah.
Okay.
3 bedrooms, 1 bath ranch house with 4 acres within a mile or 2 of the Micron sites being sold for like $1 million.
But someone else is buying it, right? Not the county?
Oh, right. You
Okay,
know,
good.
you know who's buying it. Some developers buying it.
Okay, does anyone have anything else?
Good meeting. Thank you. Thank you,
Yes, good
Peter. That
meeting.
was great presentation.
yeah, Erica really knows her stuff, and I think that's really critical. Okay, thanks everybody. See you soon.
Thanks.